What kinds of things did Triple Canopy do to get the equipment that it needed?
Well, we had minimal equipment when we deployed. We had essentially about 2 duffel bags, if you will, size. We had 2 duffel bags worth of equipment apiece, approximately, and a lot of the equipment that was required for our contract was procured or acquired in Baghdad.
Okay. What kinds of equipment did you need to acquire in Baghdad?
We purchased vehicles, and we purchased weapons off the black market. We purchased ammunition. We purchased a significant amount of Cuban cigars and liquor, which were traded for U.S. military equipment in Baghdad and the surrounding area.
Now, you mentioned that vehicles were purchased actually in Baghdad?
Under the terms of our call order, the Triple Canopy acquired as contractor purchased equipment on behalf of the U.S. government 56 what we call soft vehicles, which are non-armored vehicles. They were locally purchased in Baghdad, and they were a lot of high-end sedans are common in Baghdad, like BMW 740s, Mercedes 600 series and 500 series sedans. We purchased those type of vehicles, and we purchased a few utilitarian trucks and stuff like that. We got there was a specific automobile dealership that we dealt with when we first started purchasing vehicles over there. We got titles with each vehicle. When the whole thing was over, I think we were missing contract or titles on probably 24, 25 vehicles, which I thought indicated they were stolen vehicles.
Do you know how Triple Canopy managed to acquire vehicles that didn't have titles?
It's a cash economy in Iraq. There's no electronic funds transfers. There's no, when you're dealing with locals at this time in 2004, so they paid cash. And my initial concern, which I relayed to Mr. Nicholson, was these vehicles are a lot more expensive than what we're purchasing them for. We were getting $60,000, $70,000 vehicles for $25,000, $30,000. And as long as we had the title, we were good with that. When the title stopped coming in, the requirement to be contract compliant and purchase the vehicles as specified by the contract superseded the need to have a title, so the vehicles were purchased anyway.
Well, you talked about the vehicles. You also mentioned that there were some weapons purchased from the black market. What did you mean by that?
Triple Canopy purchased over 900 AK-47 rifles on the black market, several machine guns, PKM machine guns, RPK, long barrel AK-47s, several Dragunov sniper rifles. These weapons were purchased through connections that we had in Baghdad, local connections well, there's no legal way to purchase weapons over there. So you are either supporting organized crime or you're supporting the insurgency. And the organized crime is not allowed to operate over there without paying some sort of, without it being under the insurgency knows about these activities, and I believe there's a tax paid to them to allow them to operate. Additionally to weapons purchased from the insurgents or black market, Triple Canopy received a letter from Mr. Chris Vauxhall of the Coalition Provisional Authority, which allowed Triple Canopy to acquire captured enemy weapons at U.S. Army collection points. Tony Nicholson directed Triple Canopy personnel to acquire these weapons whenever possible, to make regular stops at these collection points, and to acquire these weapons and bring them back. If they were functional, they were to be used by our personnel. If they were non-functional, his guidance was, as long as it's got a serial number, we can tell the government we purchased it and turn that in at the end of the contract when this contract gets reconciled. So they were acquired for free, and the intention was to use them as contractor purchased equipment.
Did you raise any concerns with Tony Nicholson about using those collection point collected weapons as contractor purchased equipment?
I did not initially, and the reason is when we first went over there, there was a mad scramble to get the equipment that we needed to be operational. We went over there with no weapons, with very little equipment beyond personal gear such as body armor, and so initially the big push was to get weapons so that we can protect ourselves and we can protect our customers, Department of State diplomats. And then once that amount was exceeded, generally you have a one weapon per man, and 10% sparing is a standard logistic loadout for weapons. And once that was exceeded, I began to look at it a little closer because I tracked all expenditures for the Triple Canopy's operations in Iraq, every penny for the first year. And once that amount that seemed to be prudent was exceeded, and I questioned why we were continuing to purchase weapons, because it was a significant cash outlay for those that were actually purchased, approximately $250 per AK. Pistols, we probably had, I don't know, 15, 20 pistols. They're a lot more expensive because they're a lot easier to conceal. They're $600 a piece. PKM machine guns, depending on their condition, are $800 to $1,200 a piece. The Dragunov sniper rifles, $600. Long barrel AKs were approximately $450, $500.
The insurgency that you mentioned, those are the people that the United States are fighting over there in Iraq, correct?
That's correct.
The dollars that Triple Canopy used or received from the United States government, was that part of the money that it used to purchase these weapons and cars you've talked about?
Absolutely. Triple Canopy essentially took out a bunch of loans to finance their business, which is not uncommon. And but those loans were repaid with U.S. government tax dollars, fee for service. We were providing security service. The government paid us a fee, and so essentially tax dollars were used to buy insurgent weapons,
Which funded the insurgency.
That's correct.
Objection, argumentative.
Yeah, that is correct.
Now you also mentioned something about Cuban cigars and liquor that was purchased for trade. Would you explain what you meant, what that was about?
There was a very strong guidance from Tony Nicholson that U.S. soldiers were not to be paid cash for the equipment that they were giving us. And so what was arranged was a barter system where if somebody allowed us to have this equipment, which was surplus, which was not being, a lot of these units were getting ready to rotate back to the States. They had more gear than they were going to carry back, so and there was just a unbelievable amount of war material over there. And so rather than have to account for it or store it or ship it back to the States, guys responsible for this equipment were more than happy to give it away. In exchange for that, they would be provided with a bottle of liquor or a box of Cuban cigars as a trade or a favor.
What kinds of equipment did Triple Canopy obtain through this barter system?
Well, essentially everything. including AT-4 rockets, which were deemed unusable by U.S. military. We acquired them because they were in fact still serviceable. We had 6 AT-4 rockets in our headquarters. We acquired over $1.5 million worth of medical supplies. We had an outstanding medical suite. Part of our staffing was physician's assistants, and most of these folks were former special operations medics. And so what we had was essentially a trauma suite, 2-bed trauma suite with everything that a modern medical facility has to take care of guys that get shot or injured from blast damage, trauma, heavy duty trauma stuff. We had medicines, we had equipment, we were outfitted better than most field units that did not have an actual cash unit, a medical unit. And so we got literally thousands of boxes of food. One of the things that we did over there was we wanted to be prepared for any type of a siege situation where we were staying in the green zone in a house there, a 14,700 square foot house. I had to take the measurements once for a project I was working on, but at any rate, one of the first priorities for us was securing enough water and food to withstand up to a 2-month siege. So we had a significant amount of U.S. Army supplied food, primarily tea rations. A tea ration is a big aluminum tray with a foil top. 3 tea rats together will feed 40 guys for one meal. We had hundreds of cases of those. We had dozens of pallets of bottled water. We had, I think I already covered medical supplies. We outfitted over 200 guys with trauma kits, bandages and medicines and things that they need for personal first aid. Each vehicle was supplied with a trauma kit to take care of the customer in the event that he was injured. We got a 5,000 gallon fuel truck. We got a tractor.
All of this through trade?
That's correct.
Was the majority of the weapons you got, the majority of the weapons that Triple Canopy got through the black market Soviet make?
Yes. Although there were some Browning high powers, there were a couple of Smith & Wesson revolvers, a couple of PPK, Walther PPKs. We were getting a wide variety of stuff at first, and then it kind of, there's a couple of things happened. Okay, we put in a request, an export license and an end user certificate with the Department of State. Unfortunately, the Department of State takes many months to grant these approvals, and in the meantime we had to have an operational capability, which meant we had to have weapons. So we did not get authorization to purchase high quality US made weapons, and where are Glocks made? Germany. High quality US and European weapons until probably May or June. And in the meantime, our contract stipulated that we had to have full operational capability. It was staggered. The first one 15 February, the next one 15 March, and then 15 April. So we had to have full operational capability in order to be contract compliant on those dates. So we purchased the weapons required for that on the black market. The whole mindset at the time was whatever it takes to get the job done, we're going to do it.
Did you discuss it with anyone else at Triple Canopy besides Tony Nicholson?
It was a general subject of conversation amongst senior folks that, hey, we're spending a lot of money on these rifles, millions of dollars. Where do you think that money's going to? What are we supporting in doing that? And we're supporting people that are trying to kill Americans, is the logical conclusion.
Okay, so I understand the sources of Triple Canopy's armaments, and I'm specifically only talking about weapons here, are that some were purchased from the black market, some were got through collection points of captured weapons manned by the Army, and Triple Canopy also had an export license and end user certificate from the Department of State whereby it could acquire U.S. and European weapons.
That's correct.
Were there other sources of weapons that Triple Canopy had in Iraq?
They got a few U.S. Army weapons that were specifically those AT-4 rockets that were considered not serviceable anymore by the Army, and so when they're given that designation of not serviceable, they are taken off the record books as expended. Well, they weren't actually expended. Typical example would be a dust seal on the end of a rocket is broken. Okay, it is highly likely that dust will get in there and it will contaminate the rocket's guidance and launch and propulsion mechanism, and so it is unsafe to use at that time by U.S. Army standards, which are pretty high. And so they survey the weapon, they say this is no longer usable and it's taken off the books. It still works. And we took them, we had them. You know, in addition to the AKs, we had a significant number of RPGs also, which I haven't mentioned yet. But
what was the source of those weapons, sir, of the systems of acquisition that we've been discussing?
Of the AT-4 rockets?
The RPGs.
Oh, RPGs we bought on the black market.
And the AT-4s were ones that you'd gotten from the Army as non-serviceable?
That's correct.
Okay. So, if I understand you correctly, there was basically four sources. There was the black market, collection points, unserviceable ones from soldiers, and purchases through the State Department using the export license and end user certificate.
Well, it's not through the State Department, it's just an authorization. The actual contract is between the company who has the authorization and the manufacturer here in the States. In our case, it was Colt Manufacturing for M4s and Glock for our 9mm pistols.
Okay.
And we also had some Armalite AR-10s for precision fire, essentially sniper weapons.
But the purchases that you made through these State Department export license and the end user certificate from Colt, those are all legitimate purchases.
Say again, please.
The purchases that you made through the export license and the end user certificate from Colt are all lawful purchases.
Yes.
And was there anything illegal about the acquisition of weapons deemed unserviceable by the U.S. Army?
Well, it was, I believe it is illegal to hold U.S. Army Department of Defense weapons. I mean, that's not, unless your contract specifically states that you are authorized to be issued U.S. military weapons, it is highly illegal for a civilian to own a government weapon or to have possession of one.
And would the U.S. government have known about the black market AKs that Triple Canopy possessed?
No, I don't think so. At this time, if you have to put things in context, there was virtually zero oversight on any of these security companies in Iraq at that time. And there were no questions asked about, nobody ever said, where's your export license and end user certificate? And compared the date that those documents were received and the date when they had weapons or were supposed to be operationally capable. It was pretty much a blind eye turned to all of that.
Do you know whether either state or defense or any other U.S. government entity ever took an inventory of Triple Canopy's weapons?
No. In fact, the government is not concerned with the inventory that a company has. The primary concern the government has is, are we getting the service that we're paying for? And they really, in this particular case, they really don't care how that happens. They just want the service.
And it was your impression that the government basically turned a blind eye to what the private military companies were doing in Iraq?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Well, first of all, who ends up buying the weapons back from Triple Canopy?
They're not bought back from Triple Canopy. They are turned over to the government because they are government items.
Oh.
The company, Triple Canopy, purchased them on behalf of the government.
Okay, I understand. So effectively what happens is Triple Canopy goes out, purchases the item, not to possess it, simply to use it during the course of its work in Iraq, and then the idea is that it'll turn it back into the government at the conclusion because it's the government's weapon.
That is correct.
Okay. In some cases, AKs that were purchased on the black market were turned back over to the government as contractor purchased weapons.
Yes.
And those had actually been purchased.
Yes.
And the same with all the weapons you got from Colt.
Yes.
So the only category of weapons we're talking about that got turned back over to the government that weren't actually purchased by Triple Canopy were some of the ones you got from the collection points?
Yes.
Okay. And the ones that you turned back over to the government that Triple Canopy hadn't paid for, were those primarily the non-functioning ones?
Some were functional and some were not.
Okay.
Yeah, again, the key point being a serial number. That's how weapons are tracked, is a serial number that's etched into the receiver. The main component of a firearm.
Okay. Well, help me understand how this would happen then. If Triple Canopy had acquired the firearm at one of the collection points and then turned it back over to the government, wouldn't the government have a record that that particular serial number had not been purchased?
No, because when these weapons were collected from the collection points, when they were acquired from the collection points, they didn't go out by serial number. They just said, yeah, take them.
Okay.
There was no paperwork associated with that. We typically would show up with a letter of authorization saying, hey, look, we can have these, give them to us. And depending on the mood of the particular guard there, you could either get them or they would tell you no. And so it was pretty haphazard.
Okay. And did you previously testify that with regard to the weapons received from the collection points, you got about 200 AKs and some cats and dogs?
Yes.
Okay. And of those weapons, of those 200, how many were turned back into the government as contractor purchased weapons?
I do not know.
Do you have an estimate?
I would estimate, since they were essentially unserviceable or in poor condition, probably everyone they could, they did.
Well, by everyone they could, is that all 200 or some percentage less than that?
I would bet you money that it was all of them. However, I do not have direct knowledge of that.
Okay. When you say you don't have direct knowledge, do you mean you don't have direct knowledge of whether the weapons were serviceable?
No, I don't know if they were serviceable, and I don't know if they were actually depicted as a contractor purchased equipment.
Okay.
They were acquired with the intent to do that. That was specific direction by Tony Nicholson.
But you don't know whether that was ever actually done?
That's correct.
Mr. Boline, did you previously testify that you're not aware of any medical supplies that were acquired through trade that were ultimately returned to the government as contractor purchased equipment?
No, I don't believe this contract was structured such that medical equipment would be in the category of government furnished equipment. Therefore, the contractor does not have to turn that back in. So,
Are you aware of any vehicles that were acquired through trade that was turned into the government as contractor purchased equipment?
absolutely. Yes.
Okay. How many?
I believe there were 56 soft vehicles or non-armored vehicles, and I believe there were 36 hard vehicles or armored vehicles, and they were all purchased on behalf of the government.
They were all purchased on behalf of the government?
Yes,
So Triple Canopy actually bought these items,
that's correct.
and then it turned them back into the government.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I must not have been clear about my question. What I'm concerned with is any vehicles that Triple Canopy didn't purchase that it attempted to turn back into the government as contractor purchased equipment.
No. We had all the vehicles we purchased. There was a receipt for them. In country, we purchased the soft vehicles locally, and the guys at corporate purchased the hard cars or armored vehicles, and they were flown in country or driven in from Oman. And so there was to my knowledge, all of those vehicles were paid for, and they were definitely considered government property.
Okay. Are you aware of any equipment that Triple Canopy, let's strike that, do you have personal knowledge of any equipment that Triple Canopy got for free that it turned back into the government as contractor purchased equipment?
The weapons at the collection point were acquired with the intent of turning them in to the government as contractor purchased equipment. When I left Iraq, those contracts were still in effect, so the custody chain of those weapons remains with the contractor until the end of that contract. As those contracts roll over, eventually they end, and at that point the government says, okay, where's all this stuff we bought? That point had not been reached by the time I left Iraq.
With regard to the trade for equipment, was most of that with U.S. Army personnel
Yes.
and some Marines thrown in, I take it? Or
I don't know. You see, what I have spoken to today is just my knowledge of Baghdad stuff. This happened at another level in all 11 of the sites that we serviced. So guys would get stuff and trade for stuff, and that sort of system was instituted everywhere, all the way north to Suleimania and Erbil, all the way south to Basra.
okay. Was there anything illegal about that, to your knowledge?
Absolutely. I mean, it's U.S. taxpayer purchased equipment and supplies, and it wasn't purchased by the Department of Defense to give to contractors. It was purchased to support U.S. troops.
And did you have discussions with Tony Nicholson about that?
Well, we did a couple of times, and again, his direction was, we're going to get what we need to get to make this operation successful. We need to, his words are, we are going to set ourselves up for success. And that was a constant theme, set ourselves up for success.
What did you say when he said that to you?
You know, when well, it was a constant saying, so I don't have specific, I mean, can I get that question more defined?
Yeah, how did you react when he explained that the reason for this bartering was to set yourselves up for success?
The intent was to get what we needed to do the job, and the whole thing was mission focus. Let's get this done. Me personally, I had a lot of stuff to do running all the different facets of the business end, so I wasn't particularly concerned with what they were doing to acquire this stuff. I noted it, said, wow, it's pretty impressive, and you know, advised Tony that some aspects of that were pretty questionable, and you know, he essentially, I mean, excuse my language, said, we're going to do this. We're going to set